Pittsboro Youth Theater, called PYT by those who know us, performs live on-stage plays for, with, and by children. PYT just celebrated our 5th anniversary, founded our own Sweet Bee Theater, the only theater in Chatham County, North Carolina. Pittsboro Youth Theater lives to bring the fun, creative, and powerful educational tool of theater to children. PittsboroYouthTheater.com.
Good afternoon. This is Randy Voller from beautiful town Pittsboro in the Sweet Bee Theater right here on Salisbury Street. This is our inaugural broadcast from Tosh Talk, toshtalk.com. You can go check us out on the web. We have a YouTube channel and on Facebook. Today, we're going to start with a new segment. We're going to talk about what's going on in the community, and we're going to do our inaugural Crawford versus Crawford. So Casey Mann, you're with the Chatham Record.
Yes.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Randy. I appreciate it.
So, tell us what's going on in Chatham. Every week you write for the Record. It's a weekly.
It is.
I've seen that you've got some great bylines. We want to know what's happening with the Siler City story and the trailer park.
Well, so in March, residents from the Johnson's Mobile Home Park came to the Siler City Board of Commissioners meeting. Their property where their mobile homes are on was purchased in the process of Mount Air and its expansion plan for the new poultry plant down in Siler City.
So those are jobs.
Indeed. I think the original estimates were 500, and then they've now, with this expansion, predict potentially up to 1,800 new jobs.
So what was the issue that got all the people whipped up, that got the Hispanic liaison involved, and actually came to the county commissioners? Why did that happen?
Well, the mobile home park itself has been there for a long time, and the mobile homes themselves, a majority of them predate 1976 or the early 1980s, and many of those homes were purchased by the residents during their time there over the past decade or so. And many of those homes are no longer able to be moved or get permitted for new placement. So essentially, the land underneath their homes was sold, and their homes cannot be moved.
So what you're referring to is, a lot of people don't understand, when you have a mobile home park, the mobile home itself is personal property, where the land is real property, and a lot of these folks, they lease the land.
Precisely. They paid, I believe it was $210 a month for the land, for the lot of land, and a trailer, typically it's sold similar to a car, so it has a title, it doesn't have a deed.
So in this particular case, the company needed the land, they were buying the property from Johnson's, and there was an issue about how much money would be paid to the residents that were being forced to move.
Exactly, and there was a question. The Hispanic liaison and representatives of Mount Air had been in discussions for quite some time about negotiating eviction date, as well as any sort of compensation. Many of these residents who purchased their homes purchased them for approximately $4,000. That was the average that the Hispanic liaison gave me. But because they were so old, it took several thousands of dollars to make sure that they were livable and to personalize them in their homes, in investments. And that average was about $10,000 between the purchase price and the investment. So on average, they spent about $10,000 on each of their homes. And originally, Mount Air had offered, I believe it was $5,000 in the process. But also rent abatement. Mount Air had not collected any rent from the moment they purchased the property. And so there was a debate going back and forth. I believe originally the Hispanic liaison originally asked for $46,000 per person for moving costs. During the course of the negotiations, the liaison and the residents went to Siler City, Board of Commissioners.
Which
they went
you
to
cover
Chatham
Siler
County.
City, that's your beat.
Indeed, indeed. But they also came up to the Chatham County Board of Commissioners as well, seeking assistance to try to come to this deal where everybody felt good about it. And in the end, Mount Air did settle with each of the residents, giving each of them somewhere around $10,000 with a little change, and it ends up costing Mount Air about $250,000 is what they're going to pay in total to the residents who live there. And unfortunately, the homes will likely have to be destroyed because they're what they predate HUD certifications, where they
so
change.
You can't occupy them.
You can't occupy them.
So this is another case where affordable housing comes into conflict with economic development.
Indeed.
But we still have an issue with affordable housing and affordable living needs in the county, which is another topic you've been covering for the paper for the last couple of years.
Indeed, and in fact, even at the first meeting, at the Siler City Board of Commissioners meeting, that was actually a major point of the commissioners there, was that this really highlighted the problem of affordable housing, especially in the county in general. It's a problem, but Siler City has a unique kind of problem in the sense that they have affordable housing, they have rental homes, but their standards, their quality of rental properties have a real issue.
So it's an issue. So I see we have Michelle Wright from Chatham County House. Michelle, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on the inaugural show.
Okay,
Tell us what's going on.
So my name is Michelle Wright. I work for Chatham County Public Health Department, and what I do there, I am a health promotion coordinator.
So what does a health promotion coordinator do?
I coordinate a specific program called the Amplify Initiative, and I also work on different initiatives that impact the entire county. One of those things is called Community Conversations. We started it last November 2017, and the goal of the community conversation is to bring together populations who are usually unable to make it to different things. There are a lot of things that happen where county decisions are made and they're during the daytime, or even if they're in the evening. Certain people with certain socioeconomic status, they don't have the availability to attend certain things. So we want to try to offer them a time. We provide full dinner, and you can bring your children with you as you participate, so that we kind of eliminate those barriers of food and childcare for the evening.
Sounds like you're making it a family atmosphere.
Yes, very much so. The goal is to make it not feel like we just want to come and ask you questions and then leave. This is ongoing. It's meant to create empowerment within the community, to teach you how to advocate for yourself, which avenues you can take if you're experiencing different issues, and how to navigate the different resources that are available in the county.
So if somebody's watching out there, how would they know that they were in one of these communities? What does this community look like?
So the term community is so extremely broad, but if you feel like you're in the community that I'm talking about, then you're in the community that I'm talking about.
So you could be a single mom who's working 3 jobs, who doesn't have any time to pay attention, and you got 3 kids, and you don't really know what's going on. Then one day you find out they're taking away your mobile home.
Right. So my community conversations goal is to get people together to talk about these things, to teach you different things on how to navigate that, and to make sure that we as the county are serving you in the best possible way. A lot of times we're able to look at survey data and we can tell maybe you're obese or maybe you have high blood pressure, but if that is not your main priority, if your priority is affordable housing, then me providing you with a food bag isn't going to really solve the problem. If your priority is being able to get more on-the-job training so that you can better yourself, and we're providing you with materials on diabetes, that's not really solving your problem.
If I was a policymaker, what would you tell me are the top 3 issues in Chatham County right now from the health department perspective that I would need to be paying attention to?
So based on our previous community assessment that took place in 2014, we identified obesity, access to mental health care, and access to general health care as the top 3 priorities for Chatham County.
So when you say obesity, what does the health department consider? Or what is the standard for being obese?
So
people would understand what that means.
We go by the what your doctor, the information your doctor would give you, so BMI and all those things that go into account for your health. I don't have like a specific number. If I say that you're 225, if you're 6'6" and you're 225, that's totally different than me being 5'3" and 225. So it's all according to height and weight standards for your height and muscle mass and those things.
But also access to good food plays into this.
So we have the local Chatham Health Alliance, which is available for anybody to join. It consists of community members and nonprofit organizations, and they have actually created subcommittees. So there's an obesity subcommittee that works on access to healthy foods. There's like a community garden working group that helps to identify currently they're identifying available community gardens and seeing how we can help them to broaden their outreach in different communities. They have people who are working on nutrition in daycare centers, school systems, and we even have a program called Exercise is Medicine. So when you go to doctors who are participating, instead of just prescribing medication, they'll prescribe you an amount of time to walk and encourage you to participate in other activities in place of just medication.
So a more preventative
Yes.
prescription as opposed to saying, here's some pills,
Yes.
which has gotten this country in a lot of problems. So the second item you mentioned is mental health, which
Yes.
is also causing problems all over this country with these shootings and other things.
Yeah.
But what are we doing to address the mental health issue from your perspective?
So the Health Department and Health Alliance have the Access to Mental Health Care Working Group or Subcommittee. And we work closely with Cardinal Innovations and Daymark, which is currently one of the providers for the county who accepts Medicaid, as well as Renaissance Wellness Center that's actually located right here in Pittsboro. So part of what we're doing is crafting marketing messages so that we can let people know about services so you can have access to emergency contact information. So like the hotline for Cardinal, letting people know that there are services that do accept Medicaid within the county. And we are working on an assessment where we're going to get some more information about the actual mental health needs here in the county. One thing we have identified is that with students with intellectual developmental disabilities is that there's a need for creating more resource information for parents who are having difficulty navigating the system. And so we're currently working on assessing those parents and trying to help them figure out what to do when you take your child to the school and where else you can go with Cardinal and waivers and vouchers for care.
So we really appreciate you coming on, and as we develop this show and make this a community resource for Chatham County, we are going to be checking in with the health department. I'd like you to look right in the camera and tell folks how they can get in touch with you. So if they know that they need your services, how do they contact you?
If you would like to get in touch with me, you can find my information in the directory on the Chatham County website. If you go to the health department link, my phone number to my office is 919-545-8363, and I am completely open to you calling and me talking to you. I love phone calls. You can contact me by email, Michelle, MICHELLE .Wright, WRIGHT, at chathamnc.org. And I would also like to encourage you to attend our next community conversation on Thursday, April the 12th in Siler City at Corinth AME Zion Church on Martin Luther King Boulevard, 491 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. It's going to start at 6 o'clock p.m. Again, full dinner will be served. You are able to bring your children, and we're just going to have some really great conversation about teaching you how to advocate for yourself, doing some empowerment things, and talking about issues in the county.
Thank you very much for coming on today, Michelle, and we hope that people hear your message, and as time goes on, we hope we can reach a wider part of the community.
I hope to come back.
So Casey,
Yes.
we're going to bounce back in. So were you even aware this was going on?
The Chatham Health Alliance,
Yeah.
indeed. This is a newer thing with the county that the county has put together. It's a more organic than a typical committee, in the sense that typically committees are, folks who are appointed and they have these very strict meetings of here is the agenda and we're going to meet here and do this. Whereas the Chatham Health Alliance particularly has a different way of doing things. Their agendas, while there still are things that they're going to focus on, they go much more into the community in order to engage. And particularly because of the nature of what it is, health, public health, they go into the communities. And so it's a very interesting, new, innovative approach to committee work.
So we're going to ask you this question. What are you working on story-wise right now? I mean, we have this headline, not very good for Pittsboro, that Pittsboro Ford is leaving after all these years. Pittsboro Ford has had a long relationship with Pittsboro, including buildings downtown where they used to make Model Ts. And they're gone, and the site where Eagles is going, which is a bit controversial, that used to be the Ford site. You told me earlier that they weren't very communicative with you about what happened.
Well, and this was my fellow journalist, John Hunter, is the one who dug into this a little bit. It was interesting because we found out very much the way a lot of Ford customers found out.
A letter in the mail?
No, actually, our receptionist in Pittsboro called Ford to see if she could get her car serviced, and they said they were closing that day. That's how we found out.
That's how you found out.
That's how we found out.
This is going to be a story we're going to follow up on, but I want you to tell me what's a story you're working on right now.
Well, there's a few things I'm working on in the upcoming weeks. The broadband access in Chatham County
Which is not very good.
Oh no, it's typical of many rural counties. Chatham County has the same disparity of access because providers typically will only go in to provide service in areas where it will make them money based on the rate.
So
of
there's a
investment.
challenge with the last mile. They don't want to provide that last mile.
Exactly.
And you worked years ago with a partner of yours when we were trying to get municipal and countywide broadband, which the telcos decided to lobby against.
Municipal broadband, meaning essentially broadband that is like a public utility, like the water in Pittsburgh is a public utility. You cannot do a public utility of broadband in North Carolina. It has been outlawed several years ago.
It's been made verboten.
Yep.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. We're gonna get in touch with you as we do these shows.
Absolutely.
At All Things Chatham, and talk about what's going on in the news.
Happy
We're going to
to.
move over to Leslie Landis, who is a longtime board member with Chatham Arts Council, and who's working diligently on Clyde Fest.
I think, do you want to? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here to talk about Clyde Fest 2018, and that's hosted by the Chatham Arts Council. It's happening next Saturday, April 14th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Bynum Ball Field. This is the 16th year of Clyde Fest. It's a folk art celebration that celebrates Clyde Jones, the international folk artist who lives in Bynum. Many of you may know his critters, of which this is an example, a small example. Clyde is known for taking found objects and turning them into what he calls critters. They can be alligators or dogs or whatever you decide they are, because sometimes they're not so identifiable. But in any case, Clyde loves children. He celebrates and appreciates the creative process. And so we are having this carnival for the 16th year, again, next Saturday, April 14th, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we invite everyone to come out. If you want more information, I'm just going to say early on, please visit clydefest.org for more information, to see a lineup of the live music, the food trucks, the games. We'll have a critter auction, and I think we're going to have a critter raffle. We definitely have a critter demo, and it's lots of fun for everyone. We hope everyone will show up.
So, do you know the story about Clyde and Mikhail Brishnikov?
Yes, there's a famous story about Mikhail Baryshnikov, the ballet dancer who was in the Triangle area performing in a play at Duke. And he had heard about this folk artist in Bynum, and he came to check him out, wanted to buy some critters from Clyde.
Wanted to buy critters, which you cannot do.
Cannot buy them. That's why the auction is so important at Clyde Fest. Clyde gives his art away. It's really actually quite brilliant because it makes his art priceless. And Mikhail showed up, Mr. Baryshnikov, that is.
In a limo.
In a limo.
In Bynum.
In Bynum. Asked to buy a couple of the critters he saw in Clyde's yard. And Clyde said, no, that's not going to happen. And they talked a little bit, and Mikhail got ready to leave. And one of Mr. Baryshnikov's handlers came and spoke with Clyde and said, do you know who this man is? And Clyde said, well, no, but he seems to know who I am. And Clyde came to understand that Mr. Baryshnikov was buying the critters for his children and relented and donated 2 critters to Mr. Baryshnikov.
The part that I always love is that Clyde actually went to saw them in half so Mikhail could actually get them on the airplane. And they said, what are you doing? And Clyde said, you could just nail it back together.
He's a very careful artist. He makes very careful decisions, but it's also his art, and he does whatever he wants to with his art.
Exactly. So speaking of art, one of our sponsors today is actually the Sweet Bee Theater, and Craig Witter is the brains behind a lot of this, and we are so honored to be in his space. So we want to bring more representatives of the arts because, as Tommy Edwards always said, in Chatham County, you could throw a rock at a tree and hit an artist and they'd fall out and land on a musician. So here we are in your space. You've managed to turn this place into something rather amazing. So tell us about it.
Well, thank you, Randy. Yeah, you know, we had the forethought and brain power to start a theater organization in a county without a theater 5 years ago, and had to resolve that situation. So we needed this room terribly. The Sweet Bee Theater is the room we're in here, and thousands of folks around Pittsboro and Chatham County and the Triangle have been here. 800,000 people saw us on December.
800,000?
Three-quarters of a million people. Three-quarters of a million people,
wow.
Yeah. We got lucky enough to have a Hollywood star that heard about us, saw our sign on the street, came in, recorded the event, and put it on his website. That's
Who was the star that was in Pittsburgh?
Now, if I could have sold those people popcorn, it would be a wonderful thing. Alex Wasabi has 9 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. Wow. And so who figured, right? But he called me and he said, hey, you got facilities for stars there? Like he wanted to come in late and sit in the box seat. And
sit up in the box.
And if y'all haven't been here before, there's no box seats and there's no balcony and there's no back exit for limousines and whatnot. But it is sweet. And we named it that on purpose because it's all about the kids. We are the only community theater organization and place. We've got 55 kids in 6 or 5 different plays now. We just started a community theater cast, Steel Magnolias, that will be produced in June with 6 wonderful ripened ladies, older ladies. How would you say that?
Leslie, what's the proper?
I would say wise.
Wise women.
Wise women will be here on stage in June. We've got 6 different casts doing 5 different plays, starting with Rapunzel, the last 2 weekends of April, and then there's Goonie Bird Green and her Fabulous Adventures for, with, and by junior high schoolers from the area. I say from the area. We got kids from Chatham County, kids from Cary, carpools coming down from Chapel Hill here and there. The word's getting around, and it's just wonderful because the kids have so much fun. And I think I gave you guys a commercial to play during this thing. And folks, take a look at PittsboroYouthTheater.com, and you'll find it's like, what Center for the Arts? The 6 tabs under that. We got 20 some odd people coming into our music room every week to take piano and voice lessons and community Suzuki fine string lessons, viola and violin.
So it sounds like you're filling a niche that, as time has gone on and people have been pressing our educators to cut and get rid of the arts, which I've always been opposed. My mother was an art teacher. You're filling a void here that needs to be filled. We have an incredible program at Northwood, but obviously the demand is greater, and we have all these talented kids that can come in here and interact with you.
Well, there was no way for the young people. When we started this, they were knee-highs and 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And now those kids are in high school. And they've had 5, we're going on 6 now years of professional training, 7 to 8 months a year. And the quality is exceptional.
So how do you see this helping these children with their development? You as an adult
take a
kind of
look at the
watching
mission page at PittsboroYouthTheater.com. The last thing that I added to that mission page is something a mom came up and she was very serious and she said, this place is great in so many ways, and the folks just say that. But you know what impresses me the most about your organization? And I said, what? She said, you taught my son how to use a hanger. Right? It's like, the youngsters, when they come on stage.
I still haven't mastered that, by the way.
I bet. That's what I hear.
Yeah, exactly.
And when the kids come on stage, they have to keep up with their peers in the cast with scripts for 2 months. And so their reading skills, I'm told by parents, go up tremendously as they participate. Speaking, the dominant way that people communicate. People don't think about how they speak to one another, but when you're in a theater cast with a director with 50 years experience, like my partner Tammy has, you learn how to speak. That's a life skill that will last you a lifetime. How to manipulate yourself so that you're presentable, as presentable as possible. How to manipulate objects so that they are where you need them to be. Props, sets, costumes, we do it all here.
And you're giving people a sense of confidence and a sense of place.
Oh my gosh, you should see it. And the kids just have so much fun. So please, we've got 6 plays happening in the next 2 months, and the quality is exceptional. It is truly professional quality community theater, and that's the only organization like this and the only space like this in Chatham or Lee counties. There's Temple Theater, but that's a professional theater.
Well,
you might as well go to a movie.
We are so happy to have you here. As a member of the Main Street Board, Main Street Pittsburgh, and my wife as well, having a high-quality community theater in downtown Pittsburgh is wonderful and an exceptional draw, because it makes Pittsburgh a place where people want to be as opposed to have to be. And these are all quality of life issues. So I'm real proud to be here today with you, Craig. I see up front you're putting in a new coffee shop, a cafe.
Yeah, that's true.
And
it is in our art gallery. We, in starting the theater, this is 2 great rooms tied together, and we only needed the back theater space. Well, what do you do with the front? We've got an art gallery, music lessons, and in order to draw people in, we're starting the finest coffee shop in Pittsburgh. Right
those are fighting words.
Downtown. No, I guarantee you.
This is a land of coffee, my friend.
The best pastries, fresh chocolates by the each that are hand painted. It's high end, and we look forward to seeing you there often, and you there too.
Come on down to Sweet Bee Theater. This is Craig Witter, and it's wonderful to be here, and we will have him on as we grow this show, TosTalk.com.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you very much. So Leslie, as a member of Chatham Arts, what do you feel about the growth of community youth theater? This is something you guys have been working on,
It's
supporting for years.
Well, yes, it's phenomenal to have a community theater here. Tammy and Craig have worked tirelessly for years to build this, and I will say, as an arts advocate, I know that theater and arts in education in general, as you said earlier, builds confidence. It encourages children to stay in school. Because they have confidence, they find their voices, they find ways to express themselves, whether it's through theater, visual arts, literary arts, and there are studies that prove that they are better citizens, more likely to vote, more likely to volunteer. There's just a boatload of data that shows arts in education and arts opportunities for children in an ongoing way are extraordinarily positive for children, families, and communities.
Well, I agree, having been your husband for many years and seeing how you've grown this, that yes, it does. I'm very excited now to finally bring on Crawford versus Crawford. So, gentlemen, this is our first of what I hope to have many community dialogues. So, today, being National Scottish Week and both of you being Crawfords, I want you to tell the audience, what does it mean to you to have Scottish heritage, to be Scottish in America? Jim, we'll start with you.
Well, as you know, many folks who live in Appalachia are of Scotch or Scotch-Irish descent, and I count our family as one of them. What it means is that if you go back to the pre-revolutionary times, you will have veterans. You will have people who are farmers, people who are artisans, kind of like the basic stock, if you will, of the melting pot of America, are folks who hail from Scotland and Northern Ireland. So I'm just proud to know my heritage. I had the opportunity to take my daughter, Elise, in 2005 back to Scotland to the place in the Upper Clyde where Crawford is. It is an actual place. It's a ford across the Clyde River where there was a castle and a Roman fortress, because that's the invasion corridor from England into Scotland. And to be able to tie her name to a specific place was really a great opportunity. And so when I come back to the United States, I'm kind of proud that we are a nation of immigrants and people come from all over the world and kind of find your home here and make your contributions. And so it's just kind of a personal attachment and sense of pride.
So Bill, what do you think? Being you're Scottish heritage, you've also told me that you have a strong Norwegian heritage as well.
Well, my maternal grandfather was a Norwegian, and he was a big influence in my life, much larger than any Scottish heritage I ever had. He was a larger-than-life individual. He was almost a lifetime head of his chapter of Sons of Norway, mostly because he didn't need a microphone.
So was he first generation, second generation?
All of my grandparents were of the Ellis Island wave.
So they came to America through Ellis Island.
Right. But to be honest with you, this is a great theme that you've started with, but to me it's a little bit more of an abstraction. I haven't really delved into it that much. I have a member of my wife's family gave us a genetic test kit, 23andMe, something like that.
23andMe, and what happened?
I'm still waiting on the results, but I've told people for many years that I'm half Scottish and half Scandinavian, and I'd really be surprised.
Well, who's more stubborn?
Well,
the Scottish side or
Scots,
Scandinavians?
oh, far and away. I inherited that from my father. My father was a very interesting guy. He was a very smart man, but he was not an intellectual at all.
But he named you for Sir William of Crawford, who was knighted by James I. I mean, so you have a name in the Crawford line, Bill Crawford,
well,
William
I was
Crawford.
named William after a war buddy of his. I was actually named 12 years before I was born.
So he was thinking of his buddy.
His first son was going to be named William Thomas Crawford, and then he went out and had 3 daughters, and by the time I finally came around, I had a name already.
So I agree with you. This is kind of an abstraction, this idea of talking about Crawfords, but it's in the context of this general conversation we're having in America today, especially with President Trump ascending to office. Crawfords are Scottish, and in Americana, there are millions of folks that identify with being Scottish. They have the Scottish Games, we have the North American Scottish Week this week, but they were all immigrants. As you said, your family came over through Ellis Island. And today we're having that conversation about immigrants. And to me, it's of interest that you two could both be, when you get your 23andMe, you're going to find out that most likely you are related to Jim as a Crawford. You might be 10th cousins,
That
who
wouldn't
knows?
surprise me at all.
No, it's a family name. It's not a place name. That is to say, people who come from there are called Crawford. It is a family name, and it's certainly not an occupation.
I
So
bet money that if you
we're
went
kin.
back 800 years, that just about everybody with that last name was connected in one sense or another.
Right.
So when you look at your family, I mean, Jim comes from an area in Pennsylvania where a lot of the folks are Republican. You once told me that they even voted for Hoover in '32.
They certainly did, and the GAR was strong there. So most of my family members are Republicans back home in Central PA.
But you ended up more of maybe a Roosevelt Democrat, or how do you identify?
Oh, I call myself a pragmatic progressive, but it's just a label. It's mostly issue by issue. Where do we come down? But my overall view is that we need to increase opportunities in the United States, that it doesn't just happen on its own, that there has to be an active policy effort to help people realize and achieve their potential. And in that effort, I believe government has a fundamental role, and it's a legitimate role. And I think if we boiled it down to it, that might be the difference between myself and most Republicans, where they would not like to see the government be involved in what we call the race and the competition of life, that it's kind of any government involvement is kind of unfair and hence biased. But that's kind of where we'll probably pick up. Once you get to any specific policy issue, it kind of comes back to that nested set of assumptions.
So Bill, you come from an area where you come from Long Island, at least the Bill that I've come to know, that's the bio I know, and you've told me before that you do have members of your family that actually are Democrats or like Labor.
In New York,
In New York.
So, yes.
But you are a fairly staunch Republican, and you have a particular view. So how would you respond to how Jim framed that from your point of view?
I would say that the conservative viewpoint was more that government was a very potentially a destructive force to opportunity. If it steps in, it has a tendency to actually interrupt the natural progress of the marketplace. And that's not to say that government shouldn't exist or it shouldn't have a role. I just think it should be less active than what a lot of other people think it should be.
So, and is this a view you take of government then from the federal, state, and local level? Or do you change your viewpoint on whether you're closer to the people?
No, the principles of federalism practically demand that you look at government as intrusive from the top down. And as you get closer to local government, That's where I think government's power becomes more constructive. Local government should be more active locally than what the federal government can possibly do. And it's in part because generally when you're dealing with local government, you're dealing with people that are on the ground and understand exactly who they're dealing with, and it's more of a human-to-human thing instead of what sometimes becomes a distant bureaucrat to a distant group.
So, as a member of the local Republican Party, you are an officer, correct?
Yes.
And you are backing a slate of candidates for the fall for County Commissioner for local government, so people understand that. And you ran for County Commissioner a couple years ago.
In 2012, yes.
And got in excess of 15,000 votes. So, you know, there were a number of people that supported your ideas and platform. What is the difference you have then with Jim Crawford based on what you just said? He is a current sitting commissioner running for re-election. What would be your point of difference then?
I think that the Democrat Party in this county and in this town are not business friendly. What
do you say to that, sir?
What's your proof? I mean, I've supported the mega sites, both of them. We've gotten $4 million to each. Is there a specific regulation that inhibits business in any way? I've asked everyone on the EDC and I never get a specific answer.
I think there are a whole bunch of regulations on the books already that are what I would regard as micromanagement.
Name one.
If you build a box level store like Lowe's Hardware or Walmart, you are required to adjust the architecture so if the store happened to close, that they could partition it off and the HVAC and electrical would all be commensurate to supporting the smaller units. And that is a fine idea, but if you're talking to the person who's originally building the building, it's more expensive for them and more time consuming.
So let's go, Bill, to a concrete example right now that maybe you guys can both jump into. We have this Eagles gas station coming to Pittsboro on a property over here that's zoned C2, right? So they have a zoning right. A lot of people in Pittsboro and Chatham County don't want to see this Eagles gas station going over there, but the policymakers' hands are tied by what the law says. So where would you, I'll start with you and then let Jim comment. I mean, the people by and large don't want this, but someone came into town and they have a zoning right to it. Where would you stand? I mean, how would you apply your principle to that? Where should the policymakers stand there?
That's a difficult question.
It is a difficult question. I'm just curious where you'd put yourself.
That gets, you could put that into a giant basket with the whole Chatham Park project. Because whether you like Chatham Park or not, they came in here and they bought the property.
Right.
And they lived under the zonings, they provided plans, and they got approval.
But wait a minute. In that, I understand where you're going there, but in that particular case, they requested a zoning, which is the planned development district, whereas in the case that I'm citing, this is an existing C2 zoning, which allows the uses under the code, and yet the people of Pittsboro were unaware, or those that became aware that this lot over here, this old Pittsboro Ford lot, could become a giant gas station, an Eagles gas station. And a lot of folks are distressed about that, but they have the right by zoning to do it. So they're not asking for a rezoning. So my question to you simply is, if a majority of the people are distressed about this and are pressing their policymakers that they want change or don't want to do this, how do you apply your values there? Because the good for business side would say, we approve this, they have the right to do it, but your people are saying, wait a minute, we want you to do something else. So what do you do?
I would venture that if the public support was that small or the outcry was that great, that they would be best to show up at the town board meetings and make themselves known.
Jim, what do you feel?
Well, this is a Pittsboro municipal matter, and I'm a county official.
There you go.
I don't have to,
it's a
to
theoretical.
get into it. But as a point, though, I mean, it's the because they aren't asking for a change in the zoning status, there will be no public hearing on it formally
Right.
on the question. And so you would have to lobby the board, but if the board turns it down, then the property owner can take them directly to Superior Court, because it's a government decision, so it goes straight to Superior Court, where a judge will find the law supports the applicant's project.
So what happens
So
at the
what you
planning
need
board?
to have ahead of time, if you want to have a downtown district, that these uses are either not allowed or they're allowed only under certain conditions, you have to do your democratic homework and support candidates who, when they're on the commission, will do that. And so Pittsboro is working through a UDO, a Unified Development Ordinance, and there's talk of an overlay district downtown, but you have to get these things done, otherwise these problems come up.
Right,
And you
without
don't
an
have,
overlay
you don't
district,
have a proper recourse.
You can't deny it or change it without an overlay district. That's correct.
Well, the overlay district would have to have been in place so that everybody coming in, see, that's good for the investors too. They're going to know ahead of time that if I want to have this project downtown, then either I have to conform with, well-stated historic, values, or, it has to match the Masonic Hall or whatever, the concern is in the law, or I know it's not going to be welcome, or it's not going to be allowed there, so I won't buy the property with that project in mind in the first place. So good zoning, good planning, good rules avoid these kinds of problems in the first place. But you have to have a discussion, and the discussion has to begin with not government is bad, but government helps us solve problems.
So,
It's
so
communication.
Bill's point initially, and I threw out that question, and to be fair, so the planning board on Monday was instructed by the town attorney that they could not vote against it because it was a zoning by right. But members of the planning board were uncomfortable with it in Pittsboro because there were questions about this going there. But the issue that you brought up, Bill, about being bad for business or these regulations is a constant critique that I heard when I was mayor, rightfully or perhaps not rightfully. But as Jim asked, where is the evidence? Is it essentially you're saying there are too many regulations on the books? Is that your core argument? And I ask you this to kind of understand where you're coming from, so people out here understand your point.
It is my contention, and I'm not going to sit here and debate it point by point,
Right,
because
but
I'm not prepared to.
Understood,
But
but
it is my contention that the amount of hoops that you have to jump through to get something started in this town takes away the ability of a mom and pop business to come in here and jump through those hoops. If you're McDonald's and you have a department that can handle this stuff, and you've done your traffic studies, and you've made an estimate of whether a property is worthwhile or not, and you have to go through 6 months of whatever to get approval, then if you're that large, you can afford to do it. If you're a mom and pop business, there are a lot of times when you're going to look at it after a while and say, I'm just going to find somewhere else. Now, I bring this up in part because we have a site that was supposed to be a candidate for development in Montcure and another one in Siler City.
the mega sites.
Yes, and in both of those cases, the candidates in question left for other climes, other counties, other states. Alabama was one, and I can't be certain of anything. I'm not inside,
Correct.
okay, but I would contend that it's possible that they found the regulatory atmosphere here not competitive with where they ended up.
Well, that's a contention, that's an assertion, but there's no facts behind it. You talk about Lowe's home improvement has to be divisible in the way its HVAC set up, and that there's a bunch of these things. But that has nothing to do with why the mega site got passed over. It simply wasn't big enough and flat enough for that specific project. And there's nothing different in our ordinances here in Chatham that are different from what you find in Wake or Alamance or any other place. Nobody can point these things out, but it is a given. It's an article of faith and a false faith that the county Republican Party runs on this year after year after year. But when you ask them for a specific instance, they don't have it. And so when something happens, like a factory or somebody passes on our county, they make this thing up about somehow we are unfriendly towards business. And as somebody who served on a board where I took heat from my own side to put up $500,000 to get the options, the option on the mega site out west, it's just bogus. In fact, we've done more to help business grow than the Republican Party has in the last 10 years.
So let's
hell of
segue
a lot
then,
more.
as we're talking about boards. One of the issues that Bill brought up to discuss on the show would be the concept of expanding the Board of Commissioners in Chatham County, which is
something you originally brought to me as an idea.
exactly. So I'll start with you, Bill. I mean, you've got a position on it. We don't seem to have clarity as to what's going to happen. I mean, there are different ideas floating around, but it's apparent that the Republican Party has decided that they're opposed to this. Perhaps you might want to tell us as to why, what your position is and why.
I'm not going to get into whatever intentions were behind how it was brought up. My perception is, and the Republican
And
Party
that's fair. That's fair.
clearly is, that the end result of all this will be that creating 2 more commissioners by at-large voting will practically guarantee a Democrat majority in perpetuity. That's just the way we feel.
Okay.
Okay, it's just a matter of running the numbers. The Democrat registration advantage in this county is already formidable. Okay, and what I worry about is that the people in the rural and western end of the county will get less attention paid to them than I think they do now. And if you don't think they've had less attention paid to them than should be, we had a whole line of people from the western end of the county line up to announce their displeasure and their opposition to the notion of the entire county being zoned. And they thought it was an issue that should have been left alone. And at the end of all their remarks, it was just passed through.
So before I go to Jim, I just have a follow-up question to you on that issue. If that was so, then why is it that when we have a Republican commissioner on the board, Walter Petty, he's a good man and a good commissioner, he appointed people from the East to serve on the planning board and other places, and the most recent appointments to the newly formed Board of Elections, the Western representatives that were Republicans, like Craig Bray, have been replaced by people from the East.
I don't have an answer to that.
I would hope by the next show you could come back with an answer to that, because I find that to be interesting when that other assertion comes forward. Jim, what do you have to say to that?
Well, the question is expansion of the board and then ancillary going into the role of the West. And so I brought the matter before the board. It was something that the Democratic Party has asked for via convention resolutions for the past 3 or 4 years. And so I have been chair for the past 3 years, and so when I became just a regular commissioner or gave up the chair, this was one of the first motions I made after our second meeting. And my view of this is basically a democratic principle of representative democracy, that you need to have more representatives as a population grows to maintain the local government that should be more active, to use my friend's words from a few minutes ago. But local government to be responsive, you need to have more, not fewer, people being commissioners. So what do commissioners do? They set policy, they listen to the population in terms of looking out for problems, and then give direction to the staff, our very capable staff, to work on it. But as we grow and as we become more complicated as a county, we have a growing number of committees that have been formed and a growing number of constituencies. And it's my view that if we have more people on the board, then we'll be able to get better quality output from them. Not that there's anything wrong with it now, it's just that as we grow, this is going to be a challenge, and it'd be easier to fix it before people get stressed out and maybe don't even want to be commissioner than after. So the function of the board promotes this idea in my mind foremost. But in terms of representation in the West as a percentage of the population is going to have less and less and less of a voice on the board unless it gets expanded. It's quite the opposite. Right now, the western districts, and I represent one of them, is, you know, we got 8,000 people versus over 12,000 in the average eastern or middle district. The third district kind of straddles
you're
both.
referencing
So unless you
registered
add more
voter
people,
numbers.
registered voter numbers, and that's pretty much an accurate representation of population, although the West actually votes in a higher percentage, I think. So that even more so. So that's my view, and that I think the Republicans would have a better shot if there were more seats to run for, and they could run better candidates. So I don't necessarily believe that it favors the Democrats. But anyway, the whole discussion isn't for us as a board to decide, but to have a committee that will make a recommendation as to whether or not we put it on the ballot. So ultimately, it would be, the current frame is for the people to decide via referendum whether or not the board should expand. And in that referendum, the way it would expand has to be spelled out explicitly, whether it's 2 at-large seats or whether we go 7 seats with 7 districts or some combination of the two. All of that has to be decided. And I personally am open to having representative districts. I think there's a lot of merit in that argument.
District voting.
That is
What
to
you're
say,
talking
right,
about.
where right now we just reside in the district, but we're voted on by everybody in the county. And the West has an argument that, you know, our candidates don't win when we put them up in these county-wide races. So if we add more people and then go to a district vote, then the West would be guaranteed that it would have its voice. So I'm open to the discussion of that, kind of mixing the two types of at-large and having district, true district voting, right? Where you have not just the residence requirement to be in a district, but that you then are actually voted by people in that district. So anyway, we're gonna have a discussion, and we'll see what the committee that will be appointed next month to do it comes up with, and if they come up with something that can make it to the ballot this fall, then we'll see what the people have to say. So I believe in democracy. We'll let the people decide one way or the other.
What are your thoughts, Bill, if it went to the vote of the people?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've raised my major objection to it.
So your major objection, if I'm understanding, is you think that it would essentially make it more difficult for Republicans that live in this county to elect someone to the board. Am I stating that correctly?
I think it's very possible statistically to lay out a case that it creates a more advantageous position for the Democrats. And I'm just have enough cynicism within me to understand that whatever other reasons are put out there for this going forth, that's part of it.
So is that cynicism Scottish heritage or Norwegian?
I don't know.
Or is it learned behavior?
No, that's probably learned behavior.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you that there could be other motivations. Certainly, those that speak of it, including myself, think that if you expand, you should actually be electing your majority in your presidential years when you have the highest number of voters turning out. So when you win, there would be a plurality. Now, I've thought about why we have the system we do now, and to be fair to Republicans, I would probably think that it was a time when Democrats knew that Republicans presidents would carry the state. We're going back, many, many decades,
Yes.
And so they probably sought to align this way decades ago. Personally, I like the idea of a mandate. When the most people vote and elect your majority, then you can say we have a mandate because 80% or 78% of the people voted. Would you be open to the notion of of serving on such a committee, or people to come up with recommendations that?
Of course I would.
Okay, well that seems reasonable.
I mean, there are a couple of factors that are a very real part of our politics around Chatham County. One of them is that we do have consistently one of the highest voter turnouts in the state.
We do.
Right, which makes turning out your own vote as a party sometimes more problematic, sometimes less. And the other big factor is that for the last decade or so, North Carolina is one of 10 or 12 consistent swing states nationally.
Correct.
And that means you have a lot of influence raining down from above every 2 and 4 years that you'd be a fool not to acknowledge as a factor.
So one of the things that we are coming up with on the 24th, speaking of races, is an evening discussion with candidates at the Pittsboro Roadhouse, who one of our sponsors, Greg Lewis and Maria Lewis, are on Main Street, Pittsboro, with myself and my wife, as well as others, and are the owners and proprietors of the restaurant. And that would include Mike Roberson and hopefully Percy Crutchfield and perhaps Brian Bach and others. So that leads to a question that folks have asked. We have a competitive sheriff's race. Usually we have a Republican challenger, but this year it's all on Democratic side. Is there a reason why there's no Republican challenger, or did it just kind of fall the way it did? And I'm asking you first, and then Bill and Jim can weigh in as to his thoughts about why that happened.
Aside from my observation that nobody came forward to volunteer to run from the Republican side, I really wouldn't be prepared to answer the question with any depth.
So do you have the same situation the Democrats do, that you do recruiting and then sometimes people just volunteer for offices and you get behind them?
Sometimes they do, and sometimes when you're recruiting, you don't, sometimes the people who volunteer aren't people you want to put forth as a party. Now that doesn't happen very often. I could think of cases where that's happened.
I could think of one case, the presidency. A lot of people on the Republican side were a little bit miffed that Trump threw his hat in the ring, because Rubio and Cruz and others thought that this was going to be their president.
And to be honest with you, I didn't vote for Trump in the primary. I was a John Kasich man.
From Ohio.
Yes, but he also, he had a good record as governor, and he was an active part of the what I thought was a constructive Republican Congress in the 90s. And I thought he had a lot of qualifications I admired. Okay, in retrospect, I think he would have gotten eaten alive by Washington. He just would have been eaten alive.
So are you generally happy with Trump, or are you just defending him as a Republican because he's one of your own?
He's not a Republican. That's the funny thing.
Well, he has an R by his name. He ran as Republican, was elected as a Republican. I mean, we don't own him.
Yeah, Republican votes put him there.
If you would indulge me for about a minute
60 million, not 63. That's what Hillary.
I will indulge you on this, and then Jim will get the final.
This is great interest
because we're on Trump here.
Speaking to the great culture war that's going on, all the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Right.
I think, in my experience, that I have a fairly good idea of how the people who disagree with me think and why they do what they do.
Right.
I think that Democrats, progressives want a federal government that is more active to provide a constructive role for the people. I think on climate change that you regard the science of whether it is anthropogenic or man-caused is pretty much settled, and that it's a concern, and that you should devolve policy from that conclusion. I think in healthcare, even if you don't support single payer, you want a more active federal government to help take the profit motive out of it and make medicine more constructive, and to save money by making the gatekeepers, instead of a whole bunch of individual insurance companies, a slightly larger bureaucracy in Washington, which would be less people and less pay, and it would be more of a control the flow rather than approve or deny. That's, I think, trying to glean that isn't really a lot of work for me. There's a lot of outlets in media and on the internet where I can figure that out and try and get an idea of how the people who disagree with me think.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in comparison, I find it phenomenal that I have had people lining up in my family, in my circle of friends, to try and figure out why the hell I voted the way I did in 2016.
So why did you vote the way you voted?
Why I continue to support him.
Why do you continue to support him?
Because there's a number of reasons.
Okay, I'll let you think on that, because Jim gets an opportunity to respond to what started this rabbit hole here.
Which was a sheriff's
race.
It
was a sheriff's race, but we kind of diverged.
I have to say, I appreciate Bill's kind of summation of the progressive viewpoint. He actually handled it
direct and straight, and I think you got some of the major points dead on, so thank you for that. But back to the sheriff's race. So we have Percy Crutchfield, the chief of police here in Pittsburgh, and Mike Robertson running on the Democratic side for the primary, or in the primary, but that will decide then. There won't be a general, well, there'll be one person on the ballot.
Right.
So there'll be one person on the ballot, whoever wins those two. I appointed Mike Sheriff as a member of the Board of Commissions. His predecessor, Sheriff Webster, retired, took his retirement package, and is doing fishing and spending time with his grandkids. So good for him. And so we believed in Mike then, and I have to say I think I believe in him now. But I am a little confused as to why the Republicans haven't run a candidate. And when I know where folks live in the county, and as I drive to and fro doing my business across the county, many of the Republicans have put out purple yard signs for Mr. Crutchfield, and the blue signs then are for Mike. So it seems to me that the Republican Party, in fact, there was at least a whisper campaign that they should be encouraged to register as independents, and then they can ask for the Democratic ballot. So it's kind of interesting how, I guess, the read here is that our county is so far to the left, or at least in the Democratic column, that in order to get any kind of headway, you kind of have to run somebody who literally has embraced purple. So I just find that that's kind of a sign of the times, but I'd prefer a kind of straight up Republican candidate. And as I understand, Percy changed his affiliation.
He was an unaffiliate and registered as a Democrat. But people should understand the system in North Carolina is what's called a mixed system, where if you're a Democrat, you vote in a Democratic primary, and then in the fall you can vote for whomever you like. If you're a Republican, you vote in the Republican primary. In the fall, you vote for whomever you like.
You have
if
to do the work to adjust your registration.
But if you're an unaffiliate, you can actually ask for a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot. Thus, people that might re-register, but only one.
You can't cut two.
If we had what's called an open system, which they do in some states, I believe in Indiana might be one where I'm from, you can vote in either primary. They don't restrict it. You could just vote in one primary. And if you had a closed system, which they have in New York, which became a big bone of contention in the Clinton-Bernie Sanders primary, if you're an unaffiliate, you can't vote in a Democratic primary.
Right.
That's called closed. So what we have here is a situation that you can pick a ballot if you're an affiliate, which is why you would re-register from Republican unaffiliate and then vote in a Democratic primary. So
it's a great civics lesson. And we got some time now to ask Bill why he still supports Trump.
Yeah, so I guess we'll go back to that now that we gave him the opportunity. So again, as a Kasich man, why do you still support Trump?
I think it would be better to start with why I voted for him in the first place.
Okay, fair enough.
Trump has a lot of bastions of support in the country, and
that's true.
You could go into a whole bunch of different directions because of a remarkable amount of his support came outside of the core of what was the Republican base that Karl Rove worked the Dickens to get out and drive in 2000, 2004. It was a different group.
Yes.
Okay.
And Trump attacked the Bushes, so that's another thing here. I mean, he essentially wiped them off the map.
Now, that's one leg of the stool.
Okay.
The three biggest legs in the Trump stool are frustrates. They're all frustrates. Economic, political, cultural. Economic, we're being regulated to death out here. There's more attention being paid to the cities and the urban areas than in the countryside. It wasn't unnoticed to many people in red country that while they were having their main streets decimated after the recession, that there was no unemployment to speak of in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding suburbs, and that they were building Tesla dealers as fast as they could, because it's the largest collection of six-figure earners that the planet's ever seen that ring around Washington. That's economic. And in the meantime, you have, for the first time in our history, over the last 10 years, more small business failures than startups. And it wasn't because there was a tremendous amount of failures, it's because the startups were harder to come by.
Well, the capital hasn't been available ever since, you know, the crash of 2008. And we've argued about Dodd-Frank.
Has been a part of
But I want to get onto the issue of economic and being frustrated culturally. So right now we have this tariff war going on, which is quite significant, and China is responding and Trump is raising the ante. But what started this in the first place was our country and certain Wall Street advisors and elites telling our business community, go over to China, gleefully give them, your trade secrets, open manufacturing plants.
Not
because you want a piece of that Chinese market.
And that was
that money could have been invested in America. So,
and it's hard to.
But who philosophically was driving that? I never favored that. I'm sure you guys did, but.
And yet it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Okay, and then
so is it economic or cultural is what I'm asking you.
Probably, it's now the second largest economy in the world. China used to be the third.
Yes.
The first one being us and the second one being our holdings overseas, which are now not quite up to China's, 12 or 13 trillion dollar economy right now. We're 17, 18. But China's rules of 51% ownership make it a guarantee that whatever intellectual property that you're
But don't you find it deeply ironic that in a state like Wisconsin, which has become a red state this last election, and has had Scott Walker and a lot of investment from others to control that legislature, they put out billions in incentives, which a lot of my brethren on the right who are against incentives, to bring Foxconn in. And Foxconn was created by Apple and others going offshore to essentially invest in China for the manufacturing. And now they're coming here when we could have done it here in the first place.
So what are you bringing up the tariffs for?
Because this tariff idea is really a response to the fact that we had no coherent manufacturing policy for years, and this notion that our financial and business leaders went over there with eyes wide open, and philosophically they decided that it paid them better to invest there than here. And now, you're saying that there's this frustration that's economic and cultural. And I'm asking you, is it more culturally driven than economic? Because the economics was caused by forces that were unleashed long before Trump. I mean, Jim should comment on this.
Well, it's become Voller versus Crawford.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Going back to the Trump thing, okay, I hear the frustration, but what happens to a raccoon when it gets caught in a trap? Where out of frustration it bites its own hand off, and that's what Trump voters have done, because they put someone in office who has absolutely no conception of public policy whatsoever. He doesn't understand political economy. He doesn't understand even coalition politics within the Republican Party. So after 4 years of him being in there, not a single one of their frustrations is going to get any material relief. So, yeah, you can make the frustration argument. Where's the Trump, therefore, is the solution argument? I haven't heard that from anybody. Nobody.
Because, in part, one thing I found is that the Trump support base is not comfortable talking to people who disagree with them. Starting with the notion that you're going to be passing out right now, or just did, that, how is it aptly put? I'm not capable of voting in my own best interests.
Public policy. You brought up the frustrations. There are public policy solutions to each of the things you mentioned. Is Trump backing any solutions? So he's got the wall. He's going to send the National Guard until he gets his wall. Well, that obscures the fact that migration across that border has dropped precipitously in the past 10 years, and it's not the problem he claims it is. Well, he's playing upon the frustrations of people, but he doesn't offer a viable solution, which is, how about getting to know and like people and building up prosperity that embraces them and my own family? There's a solution.
So you don't think the southern border is a problem?
I do not believe the southern border is the problem that he makes it out to be.
Okay.
At all, because he relies on a politics of fear and loathing.
I wasn't inclined to get into much either. Round about 2004, I was your standard operating Chamber of Commerce Republican. I ran restaurants. I had to fill 450 hours a week in a kitchen. I could fill them with 12 hardworking Hispanics who were pretty reliable, or I could fill them with 35 high schoolers from the local area, 12 of which at one time or another during the year would come up to me and go, "My grades aren't what they could be, I have to go." And when you run a restaurant and somebody comes up to you and tells you that, you don't tell them, "No, I'm going to fire you because I need you now." No, you have to take care of school, but in the meantime, I still have a kitchen to run. That's where I was, okay? But I have friends on the southern border who were telling me horror stories about having to come home and not going into the house until they took the rifle out of the truck and then did a walk around to make sure that there wasn't anybody on the property. The southern border, I'm not really worried about what you think about it. It is my impression that the southern border is borderline hostile next to a government that is a duopoly of power between the drug cartels and the government that's close to what Colombia was in 1990.
Jim?
I'm not sure what I'm responding to, his employment practices or people checking out their cars on the border. What's the question?
The basic point of disagreement was that I disagree that the southern border is essentially not a problem.
He thinks it's a problem.
I think it's a very real problem.
Well, I think it's not the problem that Trump thinks it is. That is to say, taking up your two items.
And
first of all, on the employment, I think if you come to the United States and you get someone like him to hire you, bada bing, bada boom, bada bang, you're legal. Right there. The virtue of the fact that you have employment makes you a guest worker. And then you fill out the appropriate papers right then and there. And that way we have no illegals anymore. If you're employed, you're here. So that takes care of the under the table migration of folks back and forth well and truly and permanently. Right? And then in terms of things being unsafe, the coyotes are the ones with the guns smuggling people through illegally. So that takes away one of those black market operatives. In fact, that also shuts down a lot of the cocaine and the marijuana and I guess pills now these days comes through on this illegal human chain. This way folks can come over in cars, go through proper stops, and give an answer to the officers, where are you going? Just like when I go to Canada, right? You go. We can have a humane border policy. We just need to acknowledge that in terms of the economics of it, it makes sense. We rely on guest workers, always have, always will, at least since the Braceros program of the 1950s. Let's just make it what it is. It doesn't necessarily give them amnesty and citizenship. It just acknowledges that they are a guest worker, they're employed by you, and that will take a lot of the pressure off the border in terms of illegal crossing and all the tension, and your friends down there packing heat.
Well, this is an issue that actually could be well fleshed out in another show about just immigration and how it relates to North Carolina, Chatham County, and folks here locally. I want to thank both of you for coming on and be willing to put out, a Crawford v. Crawford. I'll give each of you a few seconds to kind of close if you want to make any comments straight to the audience, and then I'm going to ask folks in the future, email us or Facebook us or send us questions that you'd like for them to talk about, as we have two divergent viewpoints here from within the same American family. Crawford's having come over here from Scotland. But we'll start with Bill. You've kind of laid out your case here. So is there anything you'd like to finish with before we do another episode of Crawford v. Crawford?
In the future, what I would tell you is it's going to take me another 15 minutes or so to lay out exactly where Trump support is coming from.
So next show, we should be looking forward to that, where Trump supporters are coming from.
One of the goals of this was to show how people who disagree, even vehemently disagree, can still have a discussion. And
correct.
There are a lot of insidious factors that I could go into the future with also that keep that from happening on a number of levels. I think that at the time of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, we were going through a time of culture war that was just as serious, if not more serious, than we're going through right now, and yet those debates went on. I think if those debates were held in a college today, that they'd end in 15 minutes and somebody would be walking off stage with a whipped cream pie in their face. Because hate speech is not free speech.
We're going to stop right there. Jim, hate speech is not free speech. Do you want to just finish on your own or respond to that in your close?
Well, I'm glad for the opportunity, and I'm glad that Cousin Bill, Klansman, small C-L-A-N, Klansman Bill of the Tartan, we're discussing and we're defining our different points of view, and I think we can deliver on some common, points of common and agreement. For example, I'll say something about President Trump. I like his initiative to put more money into the VA system. It's well overdue, and I wish him luck and hope he actually delivers on that policy. And there's some other things too. So it's not like we can't agree, and we aren't going to see good things come of the next 4 years in toto. We'll just have to, keep the argument going and hopefully come up with solutions in the future. So that's all I need to say.
I think that that's a key point here, solutions in the future. And as we come back, we hope you visit us as we do this show next time. We bring Crawford v. Crawford and Toss Talk in Chatham County. Thank you for watching us today at the Sweet Bee Theater. We loved having Craig Witter on. And every time we're going to let Craig come up here and talk about what's going on with the Youth Theater. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.